So I'm not asking you to do anything you're not already doing. But when you hear that voice of resistance in your head that says, I can't do this, we can't do that, it's impossible, this is hard, be like, hey, look, just for 2 minutes, just like have fantasy. I'm not arguing. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I'm asking you for 2 minutes, just say, if it were possible, how would I do it, right? And what it does is it gives your brain permission to go find the answer. If it were possible, how would we do it?
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Gallagher. Well, get ready to build your inner armor today. I'm bringing the big guns literally to discuss building an unshakable mindset in a world that's constantly distracting us in many different ways. Our guest today has gone from Marine sniper to FBI special agent to pastor and now executive coach, author, and international speaker. And the stakes that he's going to talk about today are very important. We're specifically going to talk about his newest book, Inner Armor, but we'll talk more about that. He's a neuropsychology PhD, so he's teaching from science as well as we go through this, a sought-after speaker, and he is going to bring the heat for you today. So I want to welcome Andrew Whitman to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How you doing, friend?
Hi, mighty man of valor, John Gallagher. Thanks for having me, Coach.
Here we go. I'm going to jump you right in. No rest going in. I'm going to give you the first question I always give first-time guests of the last 170-plus episodes. And I said, tell me the story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is. It's the foundation of really all the decisions I started making. I was the fat kid in high school, really started in middle school. And my mom and dad were missionaries, so I was brought up in a town in Australia called Wagga Wagga, New South Wales, halfway between Sydney and Melbourne. And the Australians, they don't mind, come up with nicknames. So my nickname was Beach Ball because I was 5'3" and 185 pounds, So it was like, yeah, pretty brutal. But being a missionary's kid, can't fight back. And so, bully, you're a weak target. And, so I'm living my life in fear and anxiety, like just constantly. And, the plan was me would graduate high school, out of 6 kids, I was the one supposed to go in the ministry kind of, Bible college was up on and I thought, if I don't get this under control, I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. How am I going to lead anybody? I can't even lead myself. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps. So and lost 50 pounds in boot camp. So that whole thing about, I just didn't want to be in fear and anxiety. I wanted to get control. It began my obsession with what we call the inner armor, resilience, or mental toughness, or trying to get control of the machine, right? So it's still, and I'll tell you, you probably know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, John. Like even today, decades later, when I look in the mirror, I still see the fat kid. I still hear beach ball. I still, no matter how fit you get, no matter how, you clamp down on it still kind of lurks back there behind the curtain. So you just have to constantly put that under every day. But it keeps me frosty, man.
Well, man, I think, even that very last part in terms of saying it, and that's always with you. I know that you've probably heard me say that you mentioned you listen to a couple of the podcasts. We're most powerfully positioned to help that person that we used to be. And so there's a mindset that you had at that point in time and a mindset that doesn't go away. It sticks with you that you have to overcome on a regular basis. Now, you mentioned this inner armor. Let's jump right into that, leading us in. When you use the term or title inner armor, what is inner armor? I think you mentioned mental toughness, but tell me more about how you define that.
Yeah, it is. I used to use my company or my firm, is Mental Toughness Training Center. So for the long time, for the last, decade, I was mental toughness, because I'm training SEALs and Marines and Rangers. I'm coming out of that. I was with a, private military contractor with the State Department. So mental toughness. But as I got going and I brought this to corporate, I began to think, a lot of people see, even in those circles, SEALs, Marines, Rangers, athletes, we've kind of confused physical toughness with mental toughness. So a lot of people think if I just do one more push-up or I'm going the extra mile or I'm going to grit, that's physical toughness. Mental toughness is getting control of your mind and your will and emotions, right? So this inner armor is, how do I control my mind, will, and emotions? How do I, and that's what resilience, I call it perpetual resilience, because also a lot of people have this concept that resilience is I bounce back after something bad happened. Then I'll find out if I had it or not, And it's like, no, I want this like perpetual all the time. Like if it's proactive resilience, right? I build this muscle, then when stuff happens, I'm not even bouncing back. I'm rebooting and I'm better. I make the course correction and I do better than I was when I got knocked down. But that system is already in place, that inner armor. So it's not about, I mean, we're all going to take hits in life. We all know this. I mean, stuff happens all the time. So it's not the hit. It's like, how well can you take the hit and keep going on mission with your purpose? What's your mission in life? What's your purpose? And that's a big piece of resilience, because I have a 300-year plan, John. Like, my ultimate target will take me 300. People are like, you ain't going to be around 300 years. I'm like, well, don't count me out, first off. But right, it's a multi-generational plan. It would take me 300 years to accomplish. So the reason I have my perspective that far out, because if I have a 300-year plan, I know it's going to take me 300 years to reach I call it the Emerald City, right? Wizard of Oz, the Emerald City, take me 300 years. Like, if I have a bad day, who cares? I'm still on the yellow brick road and I know why I'm going there. Right. So like Scarecrow was going because he wanted a brain. Lion was going because he wanted courage. Right. They're all going, Dorothy wanted to go home. But and there's like flying monkeys and bad weather and poppy fields and all these obstacles. Right. But nothing stopped them, and they would get knocked down and just keep going to the Emerald City. Right. So that's what we want to do. And I don't, if I have that perspective, my inner armor is that flying monkeys aren't going to bother me, and, bad storms and, bumps in the road, or even witches trying to kill me. It's like, so that's what the inner armor is, right? So it's about changing our perspective, knowing where we're going, what our purpose is, what our identity is, what my mission in life is. And then you can handle all these things that come up. They're just really, all these things that come up really boil down to a minor inconvenience when I look at them in light of my 300-year plan.
Love that. And I think about that. I've used the term, I want to impact people for 10 generations to come. So I'm with you on the 300-year plan. I think that's something that becomes powerful understanding. And look, let's go back to the Bible. I mean, they had Old Testament, they lived pretty close to 300 anyway. You never know what's going to happen. Methuselah, Moses, we're only halfway, at a minimum, we're only halfway there. So
we're getting better with medical science too.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Help me out.
I keep hearing all these things, just last one more year. And that's going to add 50 years for us if we can just last one more year. We'll see how it goes. So I love the analogy of the Wizard of Oz and using that in the Yellow Brick Road and knowing what each of them knew what they wanted. So, who are the individuals that you wrote this book for? Who are the Scarecrows and the Dorothys and the Cowardly Lions that you wrote this book for? And why did you write it now? Why now was the right time?
That's just a great question. So right before COVID hit, the chaplain of the Marine Corps called me. And he said he'd been tasked by the commandant to find a way to deal with PTSD and the suicide rates that are going on in the ranks. They tried therapy, they tried drugs, nothing is working, the numbers are still going up. What could you do? And so, because I had 6 years in the Marine Corps infantry, and I'm still plugged into, my platoon commander was a 2-star general at the time. My company commander is a retired lieutenant colonel, but he's involved in career transition and helping wounded warriors. He's plugged in with that. So I just began to say, how can we make this work? Right. So my flagship system of Ground Zero Leadership CEO, it's all, we dig into the science of it, and it's a corporate coaching, and it's like 12 weeks, and you're going to spend an hour, every, day in there with me. And the Marine Corps don't have time for that. So how do I put this thing together? So Inner Armor was built to be like a workout of the day for these guys, so that here, let me look on my phone. I call it the Mental Toughness Minute or whatever, right? And I'm doing these drills, doing these resilience drills. I'm building this resilience muscle, or this inner armor muscle, whether it's, we talked about the 8 cylinders of your life, right? And we can get into that, but each day we're hitting another cylinder. Is it my mental health? Is it my physical health? Is it my emotional health? Is it my social health? Right. And so on. So that's what this book was. So we did that and went through the beta testing. Everything was doing great. And then the commandants changed. A new commandant came in. He's like, we don't care about that. So that went out the window. But then I started using it for law enforcement and firefighters. And I kind of say this in the press release when they quoted me saying this, because when I was a street cop and I started in Spartanburg County, my PTSD levels were way higher as a street cop than we were in any of my 11 deployments, whether it was Desert Storm or Republic of Panama, counterterrorism in Honduras, or the State Department, 4 tours in Afghanistan. And they were like, well, why? I'm like, well, because you never leave the combat zone, really. I lock a guy up yesterday. He's out on bail, and I see him at the grocery store. I'm pushing the baby in the stroller. I'm on red alert. Afghanistan, I'm on a 36-hour flight, right? So I can decompress. So this thing was written for that, and it also works for law enforcement. I thought, now's the time. I mean, the chaos, John, in on the planet right now. I mean, in everything: economic chaos, political chaos, leadership chaos. I mean, cultural chaos. Just pick a country. It doesn't matter. We're in chaos. And I thought, let me put this thing out and let's get it down to at least this book. So there's 23 chapters, and they're all, like I say, it's tactical because it's literally I'm going to habit stack 2 or 3 minutes a day and work on these things. And if you just went through one a week and like practiced it every week for that drill, then moved on to the next one, you ran through this book 2 times in a year, your inner armor is going to be rock solid. It's going to be habit. It's going to be your programming. It's going to be your default mode, right? So, and that was the goal. That's why we wrote it. And it was written for, I guess, 18 to 38-year-olds, in the Marine Corps.
Well, as I've gone through it, I mean, and just each one of those chapters, I actually love that description because I see them as frameworks. You talked about those being structures or frameworks or habits, and they build on each other, no doubt about it. But before we get to some of those, because we'll talk about those as solutions, but let's talk about these flying monkeys and these witches and the wizard that kind of gets in the way. When you're working with these guys, realizing focused on military and even the police force now in terms of where you are, but you can use the leadership in general and the chaos that we're going through. What are some of the barriers, these flying monkeys that these folks are running into that keep them from, in essence, getting to where they want to go?
I think because of the way the human, I call it biopsychology. How does the body, mind, and emotions all work together or against each other? And what we found out, when we're looking at the medical science and the neuroscience and brain imaging and mapping, and how hormones actually mimic the neurons in, the neurotransmitters. They mimic the neurotransmitters in your brain. So when you when you perceive something, the chemical that is called up in that when you're perceiving it mimics the hormone, right? So what I call it the hormone dump, right? So if you ever been in a near car accident, right, where, slam the brakes, horns are honked, but nothing's happened. But then afterwards, then your heart starts pounding, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, right? There's no logical reason because everybody's safe. That's the hormone dump. And so that's what happens every time there's a stressor, whether it's combat, leadership, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, when you're running your business, I mean, my sons were running a pharmaceutical manufacturing firm, and like every day you're coming in, you feel like you're Jack Sparrow. Stop blowing holes in my ship. You know what I mean? Like, and that was worse to me than being in combat, because in combat, at least I could, I have a way to fight back. I have rules of engagement. There's things you could do, but in business, you're just like, all right, we just lost that contract, or the supplier, the tariffs happen and now the shipping's backed up and you're not getting the raw material so you can get your product out. These are massive stressors. So how do I respond to these things? These are the witches and the flying monkeys that are out there today in the chaos.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders. Hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I believe in doing business with people you like and trust and not just a company name. That's why a strong personal brand is essential, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader within a company. Brand Builders Group, the folks who have been helping me refine my own personal brand, are offering a free consultation call with one of their expert brand strategists. They'll help you identify your uniqueness, craft a compelling story, and develop a step-by-step plan to elevate your impact. So head on over to CoachJohnGallagher.com/BBG, as in Brand Builders Group, to schedule your free call and take the first step toward building a personal brand that gets you noticed for all the right reasons. That's CoachJohnGallagher.com/BBG. Now, let's get back to the episode. Love that. I mean, again, there are things that exist, and we're going to get a chance to talk about movies here in a little bit. But I just got a chance to watch again my favorite movie. If I'm flipping around between a few channels in the evening and A Few Good Men comes on, I got to stop. I'm done. I'm done for the next hour and 45 minutes until I hear Jack Nicholson say, "We follow orders or people die." I mean, it's something that's always been there for me.
My favorite line is, "I would just prefer you said thank you and went about
Otherwise, stand guard. Yeah, grab a weapon and stand.
Grab a weapon, exactly. Right? Who's going to do it? You, Kathy, you, Weinberg, right? Don't get me quoted movies, John. But it is a great mental toughness.
I think we could do that whole scene, right? I mean, that's all I need to see is that last few minutes, and I love when the Instagram. Now I've seen the recent Instagram. We'll time ourselves, but the baby memes, the baby one that's popping hilarious. Up, and that scene, so and babies doing it's just driving me nuts. Okay, so you talked about some of those barriers that exist, those things that are going on, but you've got these frameworks. So there are a couple that have caught my eye, mostly because of the name of them, but helping me specifically in terms of area where I see weakness as well. But you said something about the 2-minute rule. Tell me about the 2-minute rule and what helps there.
That's where we start everything. I start every training with that. And I asked, I'm just going to, we're going to do how I do it, right? Because I have to walk you down the psychological path. Could you suspend your disbelief for 2 minutes, right? And then people look at me like, what? I don't even know what that means. And I'm like, well, have you ever watched a movie that you liked? Yes, everybody says yes. Okay, congratulations. You suspended your disbelief for at least an hour and a half because you know those aren't real. Even the ones based on a true story are Hollywooded up, right? So you suspended your disbelief in order to enjoy this show. So I'm not asking you to do anything you're not already doing. It's normal. You do this all the time. But when you hear that voice of resistance in your head that says, I can't do this, we can't do that, it's impossible, this is hard, be like, hey, look, just for 2 minutes, just like have fantasy. I'm not arguing. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I'm asking you for 2 minutes, just say, if it were possible, how would I do it? Right. And what it does is it gives your brain permission to go find the answer. If it were possible, how would we do it? I mean, I've done that in meetings where you just throw that out on the table. I mean, something that was, 30 seconds ago impossible. Now we have 5 different options we could actually look at. And maybe they're not all viable, but maybe we take a piece of one and a piece of the other, and we're like a chef, and we take a piece of everybody's, what they would be possible and come up with a plan of attack, So I think that's a game changer if you could just implement that. And that's one of that, that 2 minute drill that I talk about every day, not the 2 minute rule, but to drill it. So think about this. Here's how, for all your listeners, like, how could I do this right now? Think about one thing that just frustrates you like regularly. Is it like the traffic in Atlanta while you're driving on your commute, or DC? Is it like the overload on the inbox? Is it, that, colleague that, you don't like their cologne, or they're always, whoever's frustrated. And then ask yourself, think about this. This is my 2 minute drill. Like while I'm brushing my teeth, this is habit stacking. I brush my teeth. Now I'm going to think about that thing what triggers me. And I'm going to say, look, if it were possible for me to handle this with poise, how would I do it? And then begin to answer that question while I'm brushing my teeth. Well, I can take a deep breath. I can understand that everybody is coming from wanting to be accepted and not rejected. Traffic, I can't control that. So here, for me, for traffic, my answer to that question was to make my car, and now I'm dating myself, but it was cassettes back in the day. And it would be like a college classroom where I'm putting in cassettes on neuroscience or psychology or leadership or communication. Pretty soon my commute in DC when I was a federal agent was, it was a nightmare, but until I did that. And then it was like not long enough because I would sit in the parking lot, I'd have to finish a lecture. You know what I mean? So when you ask that question and you give yourself permission to answer it, all kind of great things happen for you.
Well, I think about that. And as you touched on a little bit, as maybe I transition a little bit from the book to you, is that many leaders also want to, I'll make this up. Many leaders also want to believe that once I get the discipline and I do it once or twice, that these limiting beliefs will go away. And they don't.
What did I just say about always looking in the mirror? What is a specific habit
you use to manage those limiting beliefs that you have?
So this is huge. What I'm about to tell you is literally, it's the game changer of all humans. And it doesn't matter what your belief system is. I don't care what you believe, but you have to vet your belief. And then once you do, and you know that it's real, then you can anchor yourself in it. And I call it the identity statement, right? Who are you when you take away, because a lot of people, I say, who are you? They're like, and this is a huge, well, I'm a Navy SEAL. Like, I'm a cop, I'm a street cop. I'm in the gangs unit. I'm like, no, that's not, your resume is not who you are. What you do is not who you are. Our bio, and in our industry, John, right, we have to have the bio, so it gives us credibility, so we could even get on the show, right? So you go, he's a Marine Corps vet. He's a, Capitol Police agent. He was, right, PhD in theology, all these things. But that's not who I am. You strip all those away. Who am I when those are gone? So this is the baseline program. And so I came up with an identity statement of the things, the characteristics, the internals, the values of who I wanted to be and who right now and who I aspired to be, right? Where do I want to go? So it's kind of half a faith statement. And so and do it in one sentence. It's got to be very short and pithy and quick so I can repeat it. And it's got to be when I hit my foot on the driveway, and stub my toe, what needs to come out is my identity statement. When I hit my hand with the hammer, right, what comes out? So my identity statement is that I'm a man of excellence who always keeps his word. So once that's who Andrew is, whether he's being a dad or a husband or the CEO of my company or the little league coach or a PTA volunteer, right, or the usher at church, whatever, I have to give my best effort because I'm a man of excellence. So that's already pre-decided. I use that word a lot in the book, pre-decide. So now every decision in my life is made. I don't have to sit at the drive-through looking at the menu options. Right? Because how many times you do that? Oh, hang on, give me a minute, right? Or you're
Hmm.
stuck behind the person doing that, right?
Right.
Right. So I already know I'm a man of excellence. So I cannot half step. I can't phone in the effort. I'm not gonna, show up unprepared. I can't do it. It's not who I am. And if I did, then and then I'd be like, well, is that who you are? Well, no, that's not who Andrew is. So he can't do it. It's already pre-decided. You can't half step. The other thing is I'm always keep my word, right? That's my statement. Have you ever not kept your word? Well, of course, man. We're humans. There's only one guy that kept his word the whole time on the planet. We killed him because he was perfect, right? So
Yep.
but I aspire to that I always keep my word. So I'm getting very good at it. But how to get good at it is not to give your word that much, because the more you give it, the harder it is to keep it. And so, yeah, it's easy and feels good at the time to say yes to everybody, but it's pre-decided that I have this triage, right, of who I give my word to and what I'm going to do. Because if I say I'm going to do something at a certain time, I'm going to do it. Like, that's what it is. That's who Andrew is. There's no backdoor option. There's no highway option. And that one of my favorite Psalms says that we swear to our own hurt and change not, right? And when, like when I took the oath at, Capitol Police, or I took the oath in the Marine Corps, you swear to your own hurt and you change not, even if it hurts you, right? So when I keep my word, I can't change, even if it costs me money, and then learn from that. Course correct. Well, don't give your word next time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not telling the neighbor, yeah, I'll help you move, and then be complaining the whole time I'm helping him move, right? Or don't do it and then duck the neighbor for the next 10 days because I told him I would help him and then I didn't. Are you following that? That's that kind
I'm
of thing
following.
right there.
I love the idea of, again, the two-part statement as well, in terms of stating, that the man of excellence right off the bat, that is like a commitment that I'm making. But even to your point, that aspirational statement of I always keep my word, knowing that it will be difficult, but I always aspire to do that. And it
Right.
gives you a filter in each one of those opportunities that comes through. I mean, there's so many different paths you could take right off of that with regards to people ask you to do things. You're like, hey, yeah, oh yeah, I'll do that, no problem. And 48 hours later, we find out that we didn't get that thing done because we really didn't have the time,
Right.
or frankly, we recognize that it wasn't that important to us. Anything we say yes to, we say no to something else. Whatever those
Correct. Absolutely.
paths that you end up walking
Yep.
down are very important. So, one more question on the book, and then
Yeah, man.
I'm going to dive into you just a little bit.
Sure.
I often talk about the book test. So someone's going to read your book, and it's been out for a couple months now. Someone's going to read your book though, and they're going to go through. You mentioned this: if you go through it twice, and you do those things, how much change can happen. But they put it on the bookshelf, like the bookshelf that's behind me, and they only see the binding, and they look at it, 6-8 months later. What do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel when they see that book after they've read it?
Feel like I need to get back into that. So this is the thing. It's you never can you can never get your foot off the gas. So the discipline is it's a journey, and discipline means that's that you do it every day, and it'll slip. As a human machine, we know it slips. These things slip. I mean, even I do. I wrote the book, right? I've been in the and if you don't stay on it every day, things slip. I'm like, oh man, that's just slipped through my fingers, and you let it go because you get busy and things happen and your focus shifts to something else. So what I want to keep doing is being deliberate with my focus. Like this book, really, I mean, if you go through it twice a year, I'm going to tell you, it's like, I was telling one of I have like, there's like a 12-year-old, that was looks up to me. What do you do? I'm like, man, when I was 12, I started reading one Proverbs every day for whatever day the date was. There's 31 Proverbs. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I said, I've probably read it 100 times. I can almost probably tell. I've never stopped reading. Every day I'm going to get in there and find out that, unjust business practices or scamming somebody never works out good. Like I would never do that, but people do. They let it slip. People that I knew would never do that. I look at them, and then 20 years later, they're like, you know what I'm talking about, John, where you see somebody, they start out strong out the gate.
Oh yeah.
And then 20 years later, it's almost like a tire out of round, right? Have you ever had that where your tire's like it's out like a wobbling a little?
Shake your teeth out. Absolutely.
Right.
Driving down
Yeah,
the road. Yeah.
right. But at 25 miles an hour, it's not that big of a deal. But when you get on the highway and you're driving to Chicago from Florida and you're doing 80 miles an hour on the interstate, that thing is just, like you said, shaking your teeth. I kind of see that in the human condition. That's what happens if you don't stay on it. That's why I love guys like Nick Saban and Tom Brady so much, because you can win one time. Congratulations. I was talking about this to another guy just the other day. When the quarterback, think about this, when the quarterback gets that big, 100 million,
Yeah,
150 million,
the third contract. Yeah.
yeah, what happens to their performance as soon as they get it? Like, this is not made up. It's not anecdotal. There's empirical data that shows when they get the contract, and it's coaches too, right? That's why, like Nick Saban, I look at this guy, and he's like mad because we just won a national championship, but we're already behind 3 weeks on recruiting for next year. People are, you're crazy. Like that's how you have to be. Like Tom Brady. He's like, I love Tom Brady because he's Forrest Gump, right? He got picked last for kickball. He was like 199th in the draft publicly, right? But he's a grinder. He's like me. I'm not talented. I'm not smart. He just grinds, right? And he gets coaching, and he's a coachable guy, and you just and you stay at it. No one's going to outwork you, and you keep working, and you don't do what he did. Like, it's very rare. How many of them? There may be another guy that did it, like Joe Montana, or there may be somebody in the future. I don't know, but he's my contemporary, right? So I look at that, and you can't ever get your foot off the gas. I mean, this guy is like 24/7 with the nutrition and the sleep rest and the honing my skills, and if we want to get to that level, you have to do those things to produce that success. And I want long-term success. I don't want to be a flash in the pan.
So you are a man of excellence, and you aspire to always keep your word. And you mentioned like Brady's and Saban's, like they had some rituals or whatever those words, disciplines, habits to be successful.
Processes, whatever.
What are those one or two, Craig Rochelle calls them, cornerstone habits that you do on a daily basis that ensure that it sets you up for a day of success, or that has to happen?
I call them my non-negotiables, right? So if I set these things up as non-negotiable, and so we talked about the 8 cylinders, right? So I know, so just for your listeners, if they haven't read the book, the 8 cylinders are your spiritual health, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your social health, harmonious relationships, financial health, cultural health, how are you, affecting the culture, and then your professional health, right? So in order, and balance is what we should be going for, because there's people that are great in one, and then the rest of their lives are like that tire out of round, right? So I try to, what I do is I have non-negotiables for each of these to stay in bounds, right? So stay balanced. So every day I'm up, when my feet hit the ground, I'm already saying the thing. I say this thing, I've been saying it since like 1997, and it takes me 2 minutes to go through. And it's why, you're doing your morning routine. You're going to the bathroom, you're shaving, you're brushing your teeth, you're getting your hair. And I'm saying these things out loud so my ears can hear. Now it's hard when you're brushing your teeth, so I have to try and get it around the teeth brushing, right? So, but everything else, I'm talking these things to my ear. It's about my identity. It's about, who's in charge, of the day. And I mean, listen, this is faith-based show. You don't mind. We could talk about it. I say the Ephesians prayer, and I say a heavenly nature prayer. And then I say a prayer. I declare things over my body, I want my body to do. Right. So I put on my heavenly nature. I'm a participant of the divine nature. And then I want a spirit of wisdom and revealed knowledge, and, the eyes of my understanding enlightened. And at the end of that Ephesians prayer in chapter 3, he says, and that we would be filled with the fullness of God, right? If you're filled with the fullness of God, can you get any better? I mean, that's it. So that's what I also pray for my kids, and I pray for my wife. And if somebody's mean to me in the street, I'm like, all right, let's just pray for him. But talk bad, let's pray the Ephesians prayer for him. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So that's one of those things that non-negotiable. And it only takes me like 2 minutes. And then I get up. It doesn't matter what time I have to get up. If I'm at a 4:00 flight, I'm up at 3, because I'm going to spend an hour in the Word, in meditation, in what I call private worship, right? That's what the Greek word for prayer is private worship, right? So I'm going to have my private worship time. It's non-negotiable. My spiritual cylinder. I got to stay rooted and grounded, right? And I'm going to, be strengthened with might in my inner man by his spirit, right? That's part of that Ephesians prayer. So I'm do that. And then Proverbs is part of the thing. And I'm going to read something, whatever's on my mind to read that day. It might be, all right, I got to read, I haven't been to Psalm 91 in a while, safety, right? Or I'm going to read something out of the epistles, or I love camping out in the Gospel of John. And seeing, Romans, you can't, dude, I love Rome. I could live in Romans 8 and 12, like
all day long.
Right, every day. So, and I
John
keep reminding
15,
myself,
Romans 8, all day long. Yep.
Right. So we just keep reminding ourselves of those things. And then it's, I work out. Now, the workout is a physical workout. It's 1 hour of strength training, and I still do like an MMA routine in between the sets. So it's a hit workout. I get my heart rate up. I'm doing my strength training. I'm also doing my cardio, and I'm keeping my fighting skills up, right? My physical skills. That's one of my hard skills. non-negotiable. In fact, it's so hard for me to take a rest day. I literally had to make myself take a rest day the other day as I was worn down. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, it's been like 17 days since I took a day off from working out, because it's such a habit. Like, you have to like make yourself rest, you know. And I was like, I did some cross training, which I would count as rest day, but it's not really, because my cross training is I throw a weighted, body armor vest on and go for a, 4 mile hike with,
ruck.
with a weighted ruck. Right. So, and that's my rest day. I'm like, well, I didn't lift weights today. And my kids are like, you're like Texas. Everything
just
is
staying
overdone.
active.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, and those are those, and then every night I hit the rack. Let's go to bed. Sorry. You got to hit the rack at night, right? And I'm reading an hour a night. You read an hour a night. I read what, and I coach my clients. If you read something that had to do with your professional skills every night for an hour, where would you be in 5 years? So, and I studied the neuroscience. I did all that. And I found myself, I was on the international stage as the mental toughness guy. I mean, I had in 2019, I had the 350 Greek CEOs, the CEO club, the Greece, called me and brought me over there for a week of training. And Forbes is interviewing me, and literally in the Greek it says, this guy wrote the book on mental toughness. I mean, and then you're in Australia doing the, Today Extra show for the, when I had the parenting book out. And, all of a sudden you find yourself like, it's not marketing. It's not like a shtick, it's just that you dig this deep well of professional skill knowledge. And mine, it was neuroscience and biopsychology, performance science. How does it all, and it does mix with theology, because theology is the study of God and psychology is the study of the soul. So there's a lot of crossover there.
So I love that. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I think there are many of those things that, people would say they try and they don't have the time to do it. And it's so, so hard to respond with grace to that and, ask them where they want to be in the future, but to give them the truth that they need to hear, that they need to become that disciplined. And I've had to change many different ways inside of that. You mentioned the neuropsychology side as well. And it's like, again, you've gone from this kid who was overweight, bullied in high school, to signing up for the Marines, to the what we call special forces, or into the police.
Yeah.
Like, where did the interest for, the neuropsychology side of it come in? And then you made a decision to do that.
It's kind of always been my obsession, but so the Marine Corps, I got my physical cylinder under control, right? So I'm 18. I finally get my physical. Then I meet my smoking hot wife, and she was 19 when we got married, and I was 21, and I'm a corporal. And, I'm just like, blah, and the Marine Corps likes to keep you angry all the time because you're a warrior, and that's what we're trying to do, is just keep you mad all the time. So I would come home and I would talk to her in the same tone of voice I would talk to my Marines and my infantry, right? She's like, listen, I'm not one of your Marines, and if you want to stay with me, you better get that squared away. I got a cast iron frying pan, and I'll use it, and you have to sleep sometime. And she's 5'3" and 110 soaking wet, and I thought she was serious. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think she's serious. So my target suddenly became, how do I have a great relationship with my wife? Like, I don't want, my target isn't to be right here. I want to be, have a great relationship. So it kind of started me on the path. I kind of credit her because I was like, I wanted to be with her more than I wanted to be angry. Does that matter? Or I wanted to be lazy, or I wanted to
be with her more than you want to be angry. Yes.
Yeah. So that's when I do marriage count, like, well, listen, what's your target here? If it's to be right, you're going to be old and lonely, dude. I mean, I don't care about being right. I want to be with her, So she kind of really started me on this path. And then as you begin to, these things started to unfold. And here, I want to say, like, the wisdom trail, the yellow brick road trail, the revelation knowledge, our understanding, it's progressive. You can't, a lot of people will be like, just give me the 1 2-minute tip to get Inner Armor. I'm like, you're asking for like Ozempic shot to be like mentally, armored up. There's nothing like that, man. There's just no,
Right.
So I got that, I'm like, I can't be angry all the time. So I started working on that cylinder, right? So harmonious relationships. And then, your thoughts are kind of going crazy. I'm like, there's times where I still have this emotional outbreaks. I don't like that. They're, making emotional decisions. I don't have a process how I think my thoughts. So I thought, listen, I have a process for marksmanship, right? There's a process to swinging a golf club. There's a process to driving the car. I should have a process for thinking my thoughts. So I came up with this, ordered process. I have a 4-step process to think every thought. And that's in the back of the book. I gave it as an appendix, because it's kind of a deeper teaching, not really but it's good. So it's a critical thinking thought process. I think every thought through this process. And so I could get my mental, cylinder going. And once I got that, see, I'm doing these one at a time. And I'll tell you, my spiritual cylinder got done when I was 6 years old, right? And then 12,
Mm-hmm.
6, I got born again. 12, I decided the word of God's my highest authority. So that one's taken care of. I know who I am in Christ. And spiritual, good, right? So once you get that done, then I worked on physical. When I got physical done, I went to social, but I would recommend getting your mental under control first, because I was trying to do social without having the underlying. I'm trying to do tactically, have harmonious relationships, fighting my inner, dialogue. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to get my mental done. After my mental, I thought, I'm getting older. These are taking a couple years every time, and I wrote down how each one, at what age I was one time. And there's literally like almost like a 4 or 5 year span where you have mastery of the cylinder. Yeah, and you got to work on that cylinder. You're trying to work on all of them at the same time. You're just splitting your focus, right? So I want to build on each other. A lot of people just want to go straight to financial. If I get my financial cylinder right, but I'm telling you, that's a disaster, because if you don't fix the other ones, the financial ain't going to help you. It just makes you more of what you already are, right? So we got that, and then I got my mental done. I got the emotional done, which was very difficult. The emotional one is very hard to master. It just takes a lot of work. You literally have to speak to yourself out loud and get your body on board with this, right? Because your mind and your emotions will never agree. They just don't. They're like the State Department and the Department of Defense, right? They have different missions, right? So they're not going to agree. So you got to get your body as the swing vote to like get on board or not, right? So that's why I say you have to dominate your flesh. Well, we already know that, right? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That means it doesn't mean that flesh is the easiest part to dominate. This is what cracks me up in Christianity, right? With the flesh, your body is the easiest one to dominate. And we got all these, frat preachers, and people were out of shape. And they're like, the last time you dominated your body was when you learned how to get potty trained, man. You know what I mean? Like, so you got to dominate your body so that you could renew your mind, right? Your body's your problem. Could you pray that I lose weight? No, stop eating Twinkies, man. I love you. Stop eating Twinkies. Right. So you just kind of work through that process. And that's kind of the journey I took. And the final cylinder, I left the final cylinder to be last, was the financial, because if you're not, the financial is really, I'll say it like this. I said it like this in the book. If every dollar has emotional weight to it, there's no stability in your life. Right? So, and what is the money about? The money is about capacity. If you don't have the money I have is about my capacity to live my purpose and my mission and my identity on all levels. Right. So it took me a while. And when I'm talking about the financial cylinder, I'm not talking about making more money or saving more money. I literally, and people think you're nuts when I tell them this, but I invested in my financial cylinder. I spent 50 grand on coaching from some of the best financial dudes that tell me, how does the financing system work? Not investing. I don't care about it. What are the rules of banking? Like, how does that work? Right, on the interest and the charges and where and they taught me how to move the money. And I raised my kids on like $45,000 a year. You know what I mean? When I'm starting to, I have 3 kids and they're in high school, and they're like, how do we do this? I'm like, well, a lot of it is I'm using the system to help us instead of hurt us. But again, are you studying that? Or are you just complaining that those evil rich people, right? You just find out what the rules of the game are. You're not complaining about the evil football. Guys, you want to play football, learn the rules. They're not evil. That's just the game, right? So that's kind of the process that I went through. Does that answer your question?
Now, following with those 4 steps again, I love that. Again, going back into the book as well, even on the thinking side. But the message that I'm hearing is that of those 8 cylinders that you're talking about, you use the term balance. But if those 8 cylinders are not firing in unison in some way, shape, or form, you're going to have problems, much like you're going to have with that tire. You're going to have problems, and you're not going to have the horsepower that you need. And I love the fact that even the 8th cylinder, if you will, of finance can be the fuel to the other 7, the capacity that you have to make those things happen. But lastly, what I heard is that each one of those requires a certain level of discipline, that you need to make a choice of what you want inside that space and then carry out that plan to make it happen. Each one of those, that it doesn't happen through serendipity. It doesn't happen accidentally. It doesn't happen without purpose. In fact, it only happens on purpose. Often things that I talk about, and understanding, again, going all the way back to the start, understanding from that affirmative, who I am and who do I aspire to be, all part of that and going through those things. So I'd love that to bring it all together. So you've written 4 books now. This one just came out a couple months ago.
Actually, John, I have 7. There's 7 out.
Well, I see 4 on, yeah. So now you have 7.
Yeah. So
I
have
won't ask you what the next one's going to be because you probably got another one in there.
I got like 10 in the tank. So I got so 3 of the one that's fiction. The first one I wrote is it's a fictionalized version of my bio. It talks about me being the fat kid and all that, and it's all talks about some of my missions, and it's fictionalized but inspired by true events, right? So, and then I have the 3 I call the mental toughness of the resilience book. I have the Ground Zero Leadership, which is the original flagship corporate coaching manual, 7 Secrets of Resilience for Parents, and then I have Inner Armor. Then on the theology side, right, I have one called Covenant for Rookies, and that explains, that was my dissertation for my PhD. It's about the 9-step covenant process that God started with Abraham and finished with Jesus, right? So if you have any questions, why do we do bread and wine on communion? Why did Jesus have to die on a cross? Why was the virgin birth important? Why did God ask Isaac to be sacrificed? Like, why? Like, I always had one of those questions growing up. No one could answer. They just look at me like, what? It just takes faith, young man. Don't question,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, I don't think that's how that works. But anyway, so that's what that book is. Then the next one I wrote was called Righteousness, God's Equity. And so a lot of people, they don't know this, but my dad was a Greek scholar, so he was teaching me Greek when I was 13. And that the Bible, the Koine Greek, was actually a business language, kind of like English, international English is a business language. The only thing they could find that stuff written on now is invoices and contracts, right? So so righteousness is literally the word equity. But and so we don't even know what righteousness is. We think it's like a behavior thing, but it's equity. And there's 2, so it talks about there's equity as in like you have equity in an asset in your house, and there's also a whole area of law, a court of equity, and that's how God hands down his judgments. And I take you through the scriptures, very simple about how to judgments get handed down. So when you're under the 10 commandments, that's the law. Satan is the prosecuting attorney in a court of law, and you're always going to lose in a court of law against the prosecutor. Jesus is your defense attorney in the court of equity, and you always win because you just say, well, what Jesus did. Like that's
right.
What Jesus did. So that book explains that. And then the one I just had, it also just kind of came out the same time as Inner Armor. It's called Back to Basics, Good and Evil. And I went all the way back to the Garden of Eden. The first time that good and evil show up in the Bible, the Hebrew words have 15 components of each, and we explain what evil actually is and what good is, and it blow your mind. It's revolutionary how we call evil good and good evil. I mean, and yeah, like here's the first 5. I'll just give you some of the evil list. The first one is like adversity. That's literally the first thing. Think about this. Before Adam and Eve ate the fruit salad, they only knew good. They only knew beauty. Right. They only knew bounty. They only knew better. As soon as they ate that, all they had was adversity. They had affliction, a sickness. They had worry. Anxiety and worry and fear is literally on the evil list. So, you're like, well, I'm just worried about you. You got to be careful. We're on the evil list. And then we find in Psalms that it says that the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So you could even be born again, going to heaven, but doing evil by calamity and affliction and sorrow and despondency and anxiety. And that's why you can't win in life, because that's what you're doing. God can't help you because you're going around behind his back. Right. So that's what that book is. It kind of helps people out. So it's kind of a 2-prong. There's still that mental toughness, Inner Armor with all of my writings, but that's what we got out there right now, man.
No, on that avenue, Andrew, love that. Thank you for sharing that as well. Maybe I went to the wrong page in terms of seeing some of those things, but either way you look at it, folks, this guy is full of energy, full of wisdom, and the ability to write and giving you the structures and frameworks in those 8 areas of life. Andrew, where is the best place for folks to connect with you and or learn more about you? You write, but you also speak. You're an executive coach. You got a lot of things going on.
I do got a lot of things going on. So here I have one page special just for the podcast listeners. My website is getwarriortough.com/podcast. And you'll see all that, it'll be a way for you guys to plug in, you guys that are listeners. So it's Get Warrior Tough, like a warrior, right? Inner Armor warrior. getwarriortough.com/podcast.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Andrew, I got to finish you off with the same question. I always finish, folks. I give you the last word and let you know, first of all, that I appreciate you adding value to the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast and sharing with us for just a few minutes. But I'm going to give you this billboard. You can put it anywhere you want to. What's the message you're going to put on that billboard, and why do you put that message there?
Ride hard, shoot straight, and never lie. So that was my commanding officer gave that speech in 1989 when I got on board with Weapons Company 36. He was my company commander, Desert Storm. That's what he you know, a lot of these speeches are long. His was ride hard, shoot straight, never lie. It took me years to unpack that. But so riding hard is being excellent. I'm going to give maximum effort in everything I do. Shoot straight is about skill. I'm going to be skillful when I'm trying to hit my target. I'm going to acquire my target. I'm going to be skillful in hitting my target. And of course, never lie. Don't lie to others, but most importantly, don't lie to yourself.
Andrew, thank you once again. I wish you the
Tim.
best going forward. I would love to stay connected with you, and I hope
Absolutely.
the folks that listen in will make sure to get out there and connect with you as well.
You're a mighty man of valor, Coach John. Thanks for having me on, brother.